So those are the headlines. I'm joined now by Breda Brown and by Rachel Kane. Thanks very much, both of you, for coming in. There's an awful lot of coverage of Gilligan, isn't there? People are obsessed with this man.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, really, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a bit of a scary situation that's happening. I mean, this guy he's getting an awful lot of airtime, which a lot of people are uncomfortable with.
Including this airtime, we have to be.
Well, this is it. But I mean, he's quite obviously a showman, and he's enjoying returning to Jessbrook. And for all intents and purposes, it seems like he's a dog marking his territory, because obviously CAB are in the process of trying to sell the land surrounding his property in Kildare. And I mean, he's seen yesterday, apparently, when the reporters were out at Jessbrook, which is a big sprawling 50-acre place, you know, he was recording the reporters on site when they were there, yeah, and he was out. We saw pictures of him with binoculars beside a fetching young woman in pyjamas. Who was
it looks to me like there's two women in pyjamas with him there.
Yeah,
we don't know who those women are, obviously.
The presence of cameras apparently and caught off guard, but I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, this 50-acre property, apparently it's where he buried all his millions, so no wonder there's plenty of interest in people.
I presume they've had a good look around the place, though, Breda, over the last 17, 18 years.
CAB are saying that they are confident that they will have a sale agreed by the end of this week. Now, this whole property was worth about $5 million a couple of years ago during the boom, but now the price tag on it is about $550,000. So it's in the care of the OPW at the moment, who are using it literally for storage. I think it's where actually the old original voting machines ended up at one point. Exactly. So will somebody want to buy it? Who knows? Maybe they hope.
I don't know that I'd want to buy it with Gilligan coming there with his binoculars.
Well, exactly. I mean,
and it's intimidatory tactics as well.
It is, and that's quite obviously what he's doing. But I mean, it's an Olympic-size arena. It would be perfect for. Apparently, there's an awful lot of members of the horse racing industry who are showing an interest in the property.
And for $500,000, it seems like a good deal.
It surely does.
He's enjoying the media coverage, I think, as well. I can only imagine that the fact that he was released on budget day probably didn't sit too well with him, because obviously there was so much focus on the budget. I'm sure he would have preferred to have been released another day when he would have got even more attention.
Listen, let's move on from him at this point. Breda, you were looking, I mean, we've had a lot of coverage already, but this US government shutdown, it really is extraordinary. 16 days, cost of $24 billion. And it's not a permanent solution at this point.
It's not. Literally, it came to the brink, because by today they were essentially going to start running out of money, which is not good, because people want to look at the US and feel that it is a stable entity. So any sort of shakiness goes on there has a huge impact on the markets as well. So once it was announced yesterday that a deal was struck, the markets actually rallied quite quickly, which was great. I suppose what we need to think about are the workers, and they have been out of work unpaid for the past 16 days, and that's 700,000 workers, so they will go back to work today. But it's not the end. I think the Republicans have seen the reaction that they got by shaking this up quite dramatically over the past 16 days. It will come again in January, because they have to vote again in January on raising the debt ceiling again. So I think a lot of planning will go in between now and then on the Republican side in terms of how they can cause more problems. But I think Obama has to be careful.
It was interesting, wasn't it, listening to Richard Downs there saying that, you know, that they're happy enough, even though there has been a back down at the end. They don't feel in any way beaten or defeated on this.
No, and it's all to do with the far-right Tea Party faction. So there's obviously...
With their safe seats.
Yes, different factions going on within that party.
Rachel, have you been looking at this, the phone allowance for the elderly? It seems to be, it's one of the things that seems to be kicking off after the budget, isn't it? They've had €9.50 a week taken from them. Yeah,
I mean, you'd wonder, you know, were the decision makers considering this when they were making this cut, that an awful lot of people, an awful lot of elderly people rely on these phones for emergency response for their phone alarms, you know, the way they're linked up to the phone. I mean, one person is quoted in the Mail, I think, today. So it's the emergency response, who are an alarm provider. They have 35,000 customers. And this year alone, they received 375,000 emergency calls. I mean, you would be really concerned about, you know, the customers that they have that mightn't be able to afford that service. And obviously it's not a service that's not being used on a very regular basis. I mean, elderly people are feeling very, very isolated.
And vulnerable, given the spate of burglaries, particularly in rural areas. And I think this is something, you know, not necessarily in urban areas that it'll be felt, but certainly in rural areas. But I think it also leads to the bigger question in terms of means testing. You know, I think really...
Absolutely. It was another universal benefit,
totally.
Wasn't it?
So, I mean, it's going to save the government $44 million, which is not an insignificant chunk, obviously.
Sure, but pays for more than pays for the GP care for the under 5s.
Exactly.
Although that's another university.
But then
yeah.
GP care for under fives should also be means tested realistically,
Yes.
and child benefit. So I really, at this point, we should be able to have some sort of a system in place where means testing can be
Yeah, and
utilised.
you know, you'd have to say, in fairness to the minister, you know, that the basic pension was protected, travel was protected, fuel allowance was protected, and I think there are many people who would believe that pensioners as a group have been quite well protected over the years of austerity, and this is one allowance.
950, like, you know. It's
Well,
not
44 million is the real figure you're looking at, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, true.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, moving on from that, Charles Haughey is back.
Yeah, this is actually like stepping back in time, to be honest, because Aidan Gillen is going to star as Charles Haughey in this new RTE production called Sis Citizen Charlie, which is filming at the moment. It'll be on our screens now next year. But even just there are images in the papers today of all of the various characters.
There he is. There, we're looking at him now.
Exactly,
He's
you can
like
see.
him, isn't he?
And he is slightly, I think maybe when we see him on camera he might look even better, but with the slightly long hair, and he's dressed out in the dapper suit and all the rest. But apparently on the set yesterday there was loads of trailers with all the different names of characters that we know so well. Brian Lenihan Sr., Ray McSharry, Ray Burke, Bertie
I have some of
Ahern,
these pictures here. Will I hold them up to camera one and show you how they're looking?
and Desi O'Malley, and it was just, I was going, God, am I in the early 90s, 80s, 90s here, or am I in 2013? So,
It's a
this
picture
is Haughey here. This is Peter O'Mara playing Brian Lenihan Sr. and David Herlihy playing Ray Burke.
and he's quite like
The
him, isn't
good
he?
likenesses,
They
the
are.
hair from Lenihan and the glasses from Burke, I suppose, is the key
Exactly,
thing, aren't
yeah.
they? But
They're the pictures everybody's been dying to see. I mean,
Yeah.
how are they going to make
Yeah.
Aidan look like Haughey? Like, and I mean, it's quite good.
They've done
It's
well.
impressive. The hairline
Yeah.
is fantastic.
yeah, and PJ Mara has been speaking about it, I see, that he'll definitely be watching.
He will watch, and actually I think he said in one of the interviews he did yesterday he would be happy to offer advice to any of the characters as
Really?
well. So
Yeah, but he wants it warts and all, but just as
Yeah.
long as it's not all warts.
Yeah.
In fairness, yeah,
And
it'd be a great story.
A substantial production. I mean, it's costing 3.7 million to produce, and the reason they wanted somebody like Aidan Gillen is because he has currency as well in other markets like the US and the UK, so potentially to be able to sell on the production.
Oh, that's interesting, because it is such a great story.
Yeah.
Listen, we're going to leave it there today, but look, thank you both very much indeed for coming into us. And now it is time for the sports news. Jackie Hurley is here with us this morning. Jackie.
Thanks, Keelin. Well, good morning. Beginning with Gaelic games, where Cork footballer Noel O'Leary has retired.